Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. Your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any watch you see on any Watchbox platform. Please reach out to me directly. Email tmosso@thewatchbox.com for pricing details. Today, we're discussing the Rolex Oyster Perpetual Datejust 41 in steel and white gold. This is reference 126334, the white gold bezel, and the 904L steel bracelet, case, and clasp. So the watch is 41 millimeters in diameter. The Datejust 41 came out originally at Basel World 2016 and it hails from that lineage. The watch is only 11.6 millimeters thick from lug tip to lug tip, 47.4, with a 51.1 millimeter lug to lug dimension across the wrist, and then a 21 millimeter spacing between the lugs. On my wrist, which is 16 centimeters circumference, it wears well. It is particularly flat, but with the Oyster bracelet and those end links, it's also quite broad. So I'm going to recommend this for a wrist no smaller than 15 centimeters circumference. It easily fits underneath the cuff, but it is quite broad. So if your wrist is smaller, consider a smaller Datejust. The watch is beautifully made and quite sporty with the combination of steel case and the 3-link sports-style Oyster bracelet, though it does have some finery that pulls it back in a formal direction. We'll talk about that in a moment. Rolex makes its own cases and clasps and bracelets. It has its own foundry. It makes its own steel, 904L steel. Rolex doesn't have a monopoly on this in the watch space, but it is the most prolific user of this high nickel content steel that is particularly resistant to corrosion in the face of, for example, sweat and sea salt. The bracelet has conforming end links, so it better joins the case with no gap or awkwardness. The transition is a seamless one. There's a slight taper to the bracelet. The outer faces are polished. The shoulders are satin. The center is polished. Internally, the clasp has a thick gauge steel single swing arm and then a beak and a hook with a spring-loaded lift lock mechanism that you have to pull up and open to unlatch in order to open. You can see how that's articulated. It's not friction fit. Inside the clasp, we have an Easy Link system, which is a in or out tool-free adjustment, so you have a little bit of adjustability without a tool. And then there are 3 divots that are drilled inside the clasp, and you can use your strap tool to move the anchoring point of the bracelet to fine-tune the fit. The links within the bracelet are fixed by screws on both sides, so if you have a screwdriver, jeweler's screwdriver, you can do the sizing at home. The case is simple, polished, tapered, and elegant. We have polished flanks, polished lug hoods. We have a twin lock crown in steel. That's what that little slash means, a twin lock in steel. It's a screw down. The watch has 100-meter water resistance. Rolex also uses a specific type of gold. It's called gray gold. It is an 18-karat white gold alloy that's white all the way through and never needs to be rhodium plated. So unlike cheap white gold, which is more yellow and milky than this, this doesn't need to be coated, and if it does get scratched, it's the same color underneath. The dial is handmade, a combination of mother of pearl with white gold hands, white gold Rolex crown, white gold hour indices, and then the gems are set by hand on top of these white gold indices. We also have a subtle white gold frame polished for the date. So these dials are handcrafted, and if you're wondering where you can find a handmade Rolex, it's tough to find one that's entirely handmade. The gem-paved Rolex watches tend to be the only entirely handmade Rolex watches, but this dial in mother of pearl with gem setting is handcrafted. You can see the baton-style hour and minute hands are fluted or faceted down their center for better contrast against the dial base. And then the watch features a hacking seconds function and a quick set date. Inside the case, we have Rolex caliber 3235, automatic winding with a 70-hour power reserve. It features a rotor with a ball bearing instead of the old 3135's jeweled staff. It beats weight 8 beats per second. It pivots on 31 joules. It is a COSC certified Swiss chronometer, but it is more, as Rolex cases up the COSC certified movement and tests it in 6 positions, not 5, to run no worse than -2 + 2 seconds per 24 hours, and that is the modern-day basis for that term superlative chronometer. The watch features a full balance bridge and a free-sprung balance for shock resistance. It features an overcoil hairspring made by hand, so in every position, the watch keeps very consistent time. That's because an overcoil hairspring has very centered mass. That overcoil is also a blue oxidized niobium zirconium alloy, which is highly anti-magnetic. Rolex calls that parachrom blue. Finally, Rolex makes its own lubricants for the movement and even uses its own shock protection, which is called Paraflex. So dial, case, bracelet, movement, everything about this watch is made in-house at Rolex. Reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.